All right, what's going on, guys, and welcome to this episode of the Sonic Sync podcast. I'm over here today with a wonderful guest who I've had a pre-intro call before this and had a lot of fun kind of speaking to. It was like kind of a blast. But we got over here Dan. Is it Deeble? Is that how you say your last name?
Yes, Deeble.
Oh, nice, Dan Deeble. He is the information security manager over at California Earthquake Authority. My man, I appreciate you for hopping on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so why don't you kind of kick this off for me and kind of let the audience know a little bit about like your kind of your work background, your experience, your technical background, kind of similar to what we discussed earlier on before the
Yeah,
show, but just to kind of educate some people.
sure. So I've been in the technology sector for longer than I care to admit. I started off doing being a technical trainer for primarily Citrix, Windows-based stuff, SQL, and really kind of cut my teeth in the Citrix space, in the thin client computing and that type of stuff. Um, and worked my way through there, learned, came out of really no formal education in it at all, and just threw myself into it. I love the technology space. It's just intriguing to me, especially over the decades I've been doing it, watching it evolve, and uh, being able to take that knowledge and really try and get a really broad base, and focus in on certain areas, one of which was infrastructure in general, being able to tackle those kinds of hardware and software things as they developed out. Citrix was a primary one for me. Um, but then pivoting into more of the security space, that became an area of interest for me. I ran the infrastructure department in California Earthquake Authority for a number of years, and we really didn't have a cohesive information security discipline there. And I was asked to take that on. And we've matured that up now. So now we have multiple people in that department. We have a CISO who is fantastic. We've got a senior security engineer who's amazing as well. And seeing different areas and how they dovetail has been a really important thing, particularly in the security space.
For sure. I mean, one thing I did notice when I first spoke to you is you're one of the few companies that that I've spoken to that are actually doing it right. And that have a lot of the areas covered. So you've definitely done like a really good job at that. So I'm curious, like, what's your 2 cents on like say companies that take a while to evolve into like new security trends, or maybe it's like more of like they see it more of like an expense rather than an investment, and they feel it's like more so holding the company down, and they only make decisions when like disasters happen. So like what type of like advice would you have for those that are listening, or like what have you kind of dealt with to like create more of a proactive environment where you're more so in the detection business rather than just like the response, right?
Yeah. It's always cheaper to detect than it is to respond.
Yeah,
So
for
the
sure.
folks that look at it as information security is an expense. You're absolutely right. It is an expense right up until you get hacked and all your stuff gets stolen and you've got malware and all that fun stuff starts happening to your company. Just ask someone like MGM right now with the bad hit they took. Um, is it an expense or is it just an operating cost, a cost of doing business now? And I would say it's the latter. It's a cost of doing business. You can actually leverage your security posture as a business advantage because customers don't want their information showing up again on somebody else's list of hacked information. Um, Consumers have
Interesting. So
gone
you're saying
almost.
companies can leverage the fact that they have good cybersecurity like in their marketing or like in their
Absolutely.
like front end collateral. Huh, interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think consumers are tired of seeing emails come across from company XYZ saying, sorry, our data got breached. Here's your, 1 year of credit monitoring. That's worthless to me. It makes me angry. I don't need more credit
Yeah.
monitoring. I need companies to do what they should be doing, which is protecting my interests as a customer.
So how important do you feel like relationships are when you are trying to build out this bulletproof type of infrastructure that you've built out? More so like vendor relationships. Do you guys tend to do everything in house? Like what have you seen to be the best kind of practice that companies should evolve to?
Well, and I don't want to put a target on our back saying that we're bulletproof. I think any company that tries to build the walled garden is deceiving themselves. I think the way that you approach this is with the assumption that you will be hacked. And if you approach it that way, you can start looking at, well, where will that penetration or that vulnerability, where will that come from? What vector is that going to be? And in all likelihood, it's going to be your own people by, a misconfiguration or something like that. That's your most common form of having an issue. So we took on early on was training, was making sure folks knew what a phishing email looked like. What we've gone into vishing now, where we're doing fake phone calls to people. That's become a hot thing. Phishing as a percentage of vulnerability attempts is actually declining. A lot of times you're starting to see more malware be injected into auto downloads or auto updates for software. Um, so having relationships with your vendors and being able to say, is their stuff, is it reliable? What are their security postures? We undertake a pretty rigorous method of going to our vendors and requesting, do they have SOC 2 certification? We want to see their attestations. We want to see the information telling us, and we'll sign NDAs all day long. That's fine. But we want to see where their vulnerabilities are and what they're doing to address these things. Because it's not enough just to throw a wall up around our environment. Once somebody's in, you have to have a means of, I call it creating baffles, right? Where you can slow them down at certain points so that you're able to buy yourself time to respond. Because the reality is something bad will happen. If you look at it that way, then you can start saying, and then when something bad happens, how can I respond to it? How can,
Like, how do I slow down the hit?
yeah, exactly. You got to buy yourself time to react.
That's interesting. I've actually never heard of that before. It's like it's always people are kind of like always just freaking out when things like this happen. What do you that from your perspective, where do you see kind of the industry shifting in the next 6 to 12 months? Like, what kind of things do you
Um,
feel like people should be on the lookout for?
AI, that's that's the one that's got me losing sleep at night for a number of different reasons. It's if it takes off, and there's a lot of hype around it right now, but it can go one of two ways. Either it can go the way of the next version of the internet, which was a groundbreaking evolution in technology, or it can go the way of 3D TVs, which nobody cares about anymore and was like super exciting for the year that it happened. If it actually takes off, um, there's going to be a number of security concerns around that. We already have issues with, so for instance, where I am in Tennessee, they just signed a law saying that it's illegal to artificially create music using somebody's AI generated voice. So
Uh,
uh, there's a number of laws coming out like that. California, I believe, is pursuing a law saying creating AI generated fake videos is will be illegal if that goes through. Um, AI, you have attorneys that have been trying to use AI to submit briefs into court and then finding out that those briefs were incomplete or just factually incorrect. Um, AI presents a lot of challenges. One of the things that we've adopted is a policy of you cannot use AI to generate code in our organization. We've seen instances where AI was generating code that, while not necessarily malicious, could have been damaging. And that was just in our testing of this principle. Um, I think that space is going to be huge. Um, I don't foresee phishing, your traditional phishing and stuff like that, taking off. Phishing, one of the big reasons I started pursuing that really aggressively is because using AI, you can mimic somebody's voice. As long as you have a big enough sample, you can use somebody's voice, an executive who may give press conferences, for example, or something like that, to call up a help desk guy and say, hey, this is Bob over at such and such. I'm having trouble with this, and I've got a press conference in 10 minutes. Can you help me by unlocking my account or whatever? That's a real area of concern is the human factor can be much more exploitable now as opposed to just the technology factor.
so you said somebody gets a phone call that's AI, what other like concerns do you feel like security guys like you need to be on the lookout for?
I think we have to make sure as security professionals that we're not just piling technology on top of technology and hoping that we've bought enough stuff to save us. I think, and this is an area you're probably very well aware of, is making informed decisions as to what technology you're using and what your expectation is of the area that it's going to cover for you. Um, if you're trying to secure your email systems, don't assume that it's going to secure necessarily everything. Look at specifically what is the problem you're trying to solve. Will this solve that? One of the issues that I've seen in the past is people piling technology on without realizing that all of these technologies have their own vulnerabilities. The more stuff you add, the more vectors you add. So having a
Sure,
really well thought out holistic plan is much more important than just having a bunch of stuff.
for sure. And in terms of the, from the perspective of AI, how do you feel like, because I know you mentioned like email phishing, right? And that currently, if you look at the stats, is probably one of the biggest vulnerabilities that companies face due to the fact that just end users make mistakes. How
Mhm.
do you think AI is going to affect how emails are done, or like how email security is perceived?
I think AI is going to give people a false sense of comfort to begin with. I think they're going to say, well, my computer can handle it for me now. It has artificial intelligence. I've seen lawnmowers now that say that they have AI. Okay, if my lawnmower has AI,
Lawnmowers,
then
that's a new
yeah,
one.
little robotic lawnmowers that'll drive around and it uses AI to map your lawn and mow it efficiently. And I'm like, that's super awesome, but that means then that a lawnmower company with a lot less resources than a nation state or a large, diverse hacking, consortium, I guess you could say, um, there's going to be that kind of shift where AI is going to really throw people into a sense of security of it said my malware says it's AI enabled or it has cloud learning on it. It must be okay now. Um, I don't think there's a replacement for human eyes paying attention to things that look suspicious. Um, we
So you
have to
think you're of the
remember
opinion that no matter how technologically advanced we get, we should always have a set of human eyes on top of everything that's going on to make sure that things are going well.
at some level, yeah. I look at it and I go, AI is a computer program. It's a really cool computer program, but it's a computer program that has the same biases and assumptions and experience of whoever it was that wrote the program itself, right? You look at like
Sure.
Google's recent image issues they ran into, where it was generating wildly historically inaccurate imagery. Um,
Yeah.
that wasn't AI's fault. That AI was simply doing what it was told to do. So we have to look at it, and AI it learns, but it learns through flawed human perceptions and biases and things like that, right? So we have to understand is that it takes a human to look at this type of stuff and really discern sometimes the context or the subtlety behind indicators that AI I don't think is quite there yet.
How far off do you think we are until like it gets to a point where the world's adopting it as like their second child?
Oh, you got me in the future seeing business
A
now.
future conversation, man. Because it's crazy because technology has been advancing at such a rapid rate. It's kind of
It
nuts. Like if
has.
we look at from the early 2000s versus like how fast technology like gets outdated today,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. Even like home tech, like my TV or whatever, like 2 3 years in, you got the most newest thing, crazy different. Like, how do you guys move so quick? you know
Yeah,
so i feel
that
like i feel like
progression.
some people might think we're like, yeah, I feel like that people might think we're like, 10 years off. I'd say like 3 5 years, you're gonna see a
Yeah.
big shift,
If it
like a
sticks.
massive
And
shift.
here's the real key is if it sticks. Because there's been the greatest thing since sliced bread, technology wise, will stick around for a few years and it's garbage. Or it's supplanted by something else. So if it sticks and really sticks and we're able to get over the hump of how we adopt it and how we develop it. I think AI could be as big as the invention of the internet. It can redefine how we use technology in virtually every space. Um, but that's if it sticks. And I think you're right about that 3 to 5 year horizon. If it makes it past 3 years with growing momentum, then it'll be here to stay in all likelihood. Um,
Yeah, it's gonna be like hockey stick growth from there. You
yeah,
know, even with like different technologies like AR, like you see Apple creating their their Vision Pros. They're trying to get into this different marketplace. What do they call it? Computed. Instead of calling it a VR headset, they said say something computed. I forget, but I remember
yeah,
it was like from a branding perspective. I thought it was hilarious because they're trying to create like virtual computers,
yeah.
right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff shifting. My final question for you is, so from like a company standpoint, what's the best piece of advice that you can give to like make sure that there's like this constant evolution and adoption of new technology that is important for the company to stay in the modern era, but at the same time have a balance of making sure you're not introducing too many things too quickly. And because there's this like, innate feeling of like, I want to be modernized, but then there's a lot of management and execs who are like, scared of change because they're like, oh, is this gonna really help us or is this gonna put us down?
Well, and I think you hit it on the head there. They're afraid of change, but I think also they'll see a buzzword come out at some conference and say, "Hey, let's throw this in. We need to do this too." I think my biggest piece of advice is have a plan. Know what it is your environment looks like, where your vectors are, and have a plan for methodically closing those doors. If you just go off and buy a bunch of stuff, you're not going to really understand the depth of it, and you're just introducing more complexity to the same size workforce that's going to have to struggle. So the best piece of advice I could have is have a plan for where you want to go, what it's going to look like to get there, and get buy-in from your executives. Share that plan with them. Ask them if they have any competing priorities for things that they think are important, because that's going to be critical for you getting the resources, both financial and human resources, to be able to accomplish it, and then work your plan. Revisit it on an annual basis and make sure you're executing to that plan. Um, I like having vendors come in and look at our environment and say, okay, well, you've done this, this, and this. What about this? Do you have a game plan for that? And it doesn't mean you have to sign something that and go, install a piece of software the next week. It means, okay, we have to add this to the pile of where is it we need to get to. Um, I'm all about incremental improvement. That's my biggest piece of advice is incremental improvement and have a plan.
Do you think, I know I said last question was the final question, but
You're fine.
do you think companies need to make buying decisions a little faster in the world of security, or do you feel like the pace at which the industry moves is at a modest, good pace?
Um, the security industry moves, I think, at a very frenetic pace. I think there's almost a sense of panic. If I don't have X, Y, and Z, then people are going to be flooding in and taking all my secrets. Um, I think I, I think executives need to be able to look at what that plan is if it's brought to them, and if it's not being brought to them, question why. Ask your subordinates, why is this not here? Why do we have a plan? Should we come up with one? And then get out of the way. It's set the budget, set the expectation, and let's move on. Instead of I I feel like there's a fear of pulling the trigger sometimes. Um, Look at your Gartner quadrants. If somebody's aggressively in that top right side, hey, that's they don't have to be the furthest up to the right. They just have to be in there somewhere. Look for somebody that's making improvements, has a history of improving on their stuff. We have one vendor that does our scene that we bought into them when they were really emerging, and their product has evolved wonderfully for us. We have
Nice.
others that we bought into, and they kind of fell off a cliff, and we've had to swing back around and replace those solutions. Um, but on the whole, it's we're working to our plan, and we've got executives that are brave and conscientious enough to allow us to make good decisions and have that trust in us and move forward with it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, hey Dan, I appreciate you for hopping on. Where can people find you on social media or online? Can they look you up on LinkedIn or?
Absolutely. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm the information security manager for California Earthquake Authority. You're welcome to see me there. And my family and all that, we're up on Facebook and all that fun stuff. But that's just where we go to post pictures of kids graduating and birthdays. So
Very cool. Well, I appreciate you for hopping on, and for everybody that's watching, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
thanks, Adam.